Hi, my name is Kevin McNally, and this time last year I was attending this conference and talking about different meanings of participation as it related to my practice in facilitating a community gamelan ensemble in Skibbereen in County Cork. And here we are participating together in a way that it won't be a surprise to anyone, has not happened since last spring. This presentation describes my experiment to overcome the limits to participation placed on us by COVID and to make a new piece of music for gamelan that would be meaningful both to my research project and hopefully to the members of the gamelan themselves. Now, my PhD is framed by a desire to explore a way of being in the world based on a sound ontology and a sound epistemology, what Jeff Todd Titan calls a way of being, knowing and doing that grows out of the co-presence of living beings connected in sound. And I believe that becoming aware of how thoroughly enmeshed we are in the biosphere will make us less likely to destroy the very ecosystems which keep us alive. Recognizing and celebrating the agency of the non-human and the roles that those entities have in human flourishing is one step along this path. I also believe that the effective atmospheres which participatory musical performances generate are perfect models for this kind of enmeshed ecological awareness. Taking these 2 points together, the agency of the non-human and the atmospheres of affect, I had come to a concept of my practice in which the humans of the community gamelan orchestra join with the vibrant material of the instruments and the sounds that they generate to create a synchronized and yet distributed subject known as gamelan spreke gala. Everyone and everything affects every other one and every other thing in an unpredictable meshwork. That's how it worked out, at least until last spring. Now, because the instruments are housed in a medical facility, the restrictions arrived early and they were severe. One of the major outputs of my PhD is supposed to be a performance, and I had written and rehearsed an entire concert's worth of new music for the ensemble before the restrictions came into effect. So my challenge at this point last year was to come up with a new performance concept, one which would respond to the research question of interconnection, but also out of necessity be a solo performance. Unable then to play the entire orchestra or even in a sense to even touch it, I had chose to focus only on these particular instruments, the large hanging gongs. Now I'm always looking for ways to keep my practice and research attuned, and I was inspired by R. Murray Schafer's description of hearing as touching from a distance. In fact, this is how these devices called transducers work. They turn any surface that you stick them onto essentially into a speaker. So if I could mic up the gongs and send that signal to the transducers and then put the transducers back on the gongs could essentially listen to themselves and create feedback loops. This diagram here gives you an idea of how it might work. So say I play something on the guitar, although the sound source could be anything. That goes into a mixing desk or computer, which is then transduced into the gong by a transducer put on the surface of the gong, and the gong responds then to the sounds. That's one layer of interaction. But the microphones then capture that response and turn the whole system into a larger feedback cycle as the gongs listen, but then they hear themselves listening. An EBO is a device I use on the guitar which creates a tiny feedback loop on one string. And then finally, a loop pedal acts as an epicycle off the main circuit, warping and degrading the signal in unpredictable ways. Once the loop or loops are ongoing, I abandon the guitar and I can play the gongs with feedback alone, using the EQ and the gain on the mixing desk. Now, to transduce is to change from one force to another, and that's an apt metaphor for what I had to do with the new piece that I devised and I eventually called Tabhartas. I exchanged the rich group interaction for a more intense dialogue between a solo performer and an assemblage of material and sonic objects. So if Tabhartas is an offering with unpredictable outcomes, well, that chimes with philosopher Timothy Morton's concept of ecological awareness being the awareness of unintended consequences. I wanted to take one instrument, like the gong, and show that the parts, just like in any person or any ecosystem, the parts are much larger than the whole. That is, even comparatively simple objects contain a multitude of possibilities within them. I also wanted to acknowledge that the gong is not a tool I am mastering in order to control its behavior. Rather, it's a partner in the creation of the sound. Once the feedback starts, I don't have control, but I'm merely chasing the frequencies in an attempt to find interesting equilibriums. Each gong is handmade, so the tiny variations in structure and the way that the sound behaves in the room means that equilibrium is only ever fleeting. Here's a clip. All of the sounds you're hearing now coming from the two hanging gongs. The full performance of this blog going to be available on the Irish World Academy's page Monday evening. That was part one. In part two, the voices of the members of the community music group are heard. I made an audio collage consisting of a rehearsal recording and snippets like the ones that are coming up here of phone interviews I conducted during the lockdown. This collage is then fed via the transducers into the two hanging gongs. The members of the orchestra would now speak through the gong, causing it to resonate with their words. They're unable to play the instruments, but their voices can interact with them over a distance. The images are of isolated instruments, alone and out of place on different parts of the West Cork coastline. There's a combination of the familiar and the strange here, which is designed to evoke a feeling of the uncanny, which is then heightened by the recursion of the images on stage and on the big screens behind the stage. Here's another clip.
Experiencing the different instruments, there's different vibrations on each instrument, and that's what is the most important part of gamelan for me. It's the actual, I can physically feel that vibration, and that was the most striking thing for me when I came into that room was because I'm a rave person and I like techno.
Now, as far as outcomes, this is, as far as I'm aware, is an entirely new way of playing the gamelan. And for my own self, as a performer, I was completely engaged and immersed. I felt as if the gong was an active agent or partner in the process. And more experimentation with the hardware may enhance this, particularly the mics and the EQ to negate the need to be on the computer, which I felt at sometimes got in my way. Now, back to the music of what happens. One of my favourite episodes in Irish mythology is the story of Fionn McCool and the Fianna sitting around talking about their favourite music. And to cut a long story short, over the music of harp or bird singing, Fionn chooses the music of what happens. It's a choice that sidesteps both human agency and the anthropomorphic projections of what music is onto other species. The music of what happens reminds us that the values of music, it's not in the objects that arise, be it the score, the recording, or the transcription. The value is the interaction, the meeting place of intention, flesh, wood, bronze, electricity. And it reminds us then that abdicating some of the agency for creating music is a valuable tactic, especially when hyperobjects like a global pandemic cut across our best intentions. The best I can hope for as a facilitator or composer is to merely set the conditions for the interaction to take place. And then the music, well, the music is what happens. And again, thank you for having me here. And again, I'm going to give you a plug that the rest of the performance is available on Monday the 25th on the YouTube channel. So thanks very much.